Competing. It showcases our off-season progress, but how often should we compete? This is part 3 of 6 things I wish I knew before I started powerlifting. How often should I compete? The best way to get better at doing something is to do it more often. But how much is too much? I find powerlifters often fall into 3 categories: competing too much, competing too little, and then competing the right amount. Let's look at competing too little. These people usually compete once a year, if not less than that. Now, the positive thing about doing this is that you're almost guaranteed a PR. You have very long developmental blocks, and honestly, it's cheaper to do because meets are expensive. So not competing a lot, obviously you're not going to have a lot of experience. And what comes with this is the jitters. If you're only competing once a year, you're not used to stepping on a platform and competing in that sort of environment. You're not going to be used to weight selection and the waiting time that it takes. You know, when we're training by ourselves, we can go at our own pace. If we need to speed up or slow down, it's totally fine. But in a meet, it's totally out of your hands. And it's just something that you can't always prepare for at your own gym. When you only compete once a year and you have to wait 12 months to compete again, 6 months in, you might lose some motivation. So while the negative factors of not competing a whole lot are mostly mental, and the positive factors are mostly physical, at the end of the day, powerlifting is a sport, and part of the sport is competing. So what happens when you compete too much? These will probably be people who compete 5 times or more a year. Now honestly, I was kind of on the fence about competing 4 times a year, if that's considered normal or too much. I ended up putting in the normal category, but on the higher end. So some of the negative things about competing too often is you don't have a lot of time to really truly develop. Looking at the development process here, if you compete 1 time a year, that gives you 11 months to develop. Meanwhile, if you compete 6 times and you're doing a 3-week peak and then 1 week off afterwards, you're only developing for 6 months out of the year. So especially for a beginner, this can be a big deal and really hinder their progress. No matter how much experience you have, if the other person is that much stronger, they're that much stronger. Now let me know in the comments how often you compete. Now personally, in the first few years, I only competed once a year. And primarily, it came down to my school schedule. I just couldn't take off enough time to be able to compete more often. Each time I competed in the spring, I didn't feel like 3 months wasn't long enough time to really develop and to be able to compete again in the summer. And I had to wait again until the next spring just because of school. Now that I'm out though, I look to compete more often. However, COVID has kind of put a little damper on that, so hopefully I'll be able to compete again here in the next few months. So my advice, 2 to 4 times per year is probably a good amount for most people. This gives you plenty of time to continue to build up, develop your craft, and get better, while at the same time, you're not burning yourself out. Blake and I talked about this in his interview, how often he would compete in high school, and how a lot of high schools are just competing way too much. You can find a link to that up here. You just watched the 3rd part of 6 things I wish I knew before I started powerlifting. If you want to see the rest of the playlist, click up here. And if you enjoy this content and want to see more, make sure to subscribe.